Settle in. Tonight I'm bringing you 5 messed up Reddit confessions that honestly kept me up. Like, subscribe, and let's dive in. Before we start, if you ever want to go deeper, the LostFootage Club is where our community trades their own creepy stories. You'll find the link in the description. My car logged 40 miles every night while I slept. I finally found out who was driving it. He trusted numbers more than memories, because in his whole careful life, the numbers had never once lied to him the way people would. I'm 27, a bookkeeper in a town small enough that the bank teller knows my coffee order, and I trust a ledger more than I trust my own memory. I live in the house I grew up in with my younger sister Vanessa. Our parents died when she was 13, and I half raised her after that. I'm the careful one. I track everything, every receipt, every gallon of gas, every mile on my car through the connected app the dealer set up. That app is how it started. One evening, the odometer had climbed further than any week of my driving could explain. A few extra miles, then more. So I did what I do with a statement that won't reconcile. I pulled the full trip history. There were drives on there I never took, logged in the dead of night, every one of them, while I slept upstairs. One stopped me cold. A 40-mile round trip, logged at 2 in the morning, ending at a pin on a road I have never once driven. And every morning after, the driver's seat was shoved all the way back, the mirrors tilted high, set for someone far taller than me. My keys never left the hook by the door. Nothing was ever stolen. I just couldn't make the numbers balance. A man who could balance any column of figures had finally found one that refused to close, and it sat in his own driveway every single morning. He had spent his life auditing other people's careless mistakes. Now something was auditing him after midnight, and it never once made one.
He started keeping a log, the way he kept every other ledger, because the only way he knew to fight a thing was to write it down. So I did the only thing I know how to do. I started a log. Every night the app showed a drive, I wrote the date, the time, the distance, the pin. The pattern was almost insulting in how clean it was. 40 miles, round trip, 2 and 3 nights a week, always close to 2 in the morning, always out to the same spot on the edge of the county where I had no reason to be. I started testing it. Before bed, I'd check my keys hanging on the hook by the door, count them, photograph them. I photographed the driver's seat at the notch where I keep it. One night I even stretched a single thread across the gap of the car door, the way I'd seen in some old movie, and told myself I was being ridiculous. Every morning the keys were exactly where I'd left them, not moved an inch. But the seat was shoved back, the mirrors angled up high for somebody with a lot more height than I've got, and the thread was gone. One morning the car smelled faintly of cigarettes. I don't smoke. Nobody who's supposed to touch that car smokes. I kept telling myself it was a glitch, a cloned key, some stranger with a scanner, anything outside my own walls. I noticed Vanessa had been sleeping in late, looking worn down at breakfast, and I filed it under nothing. Just my little sister, tired. I wasn't ready to file it anywhere else. Every test he ran pointed the same direction, and it was not toward the road. It was toward the bedroom down the hall from his own. He was a man who could spot a single misplaced cent in a year of accounts, refusing to read the one entry his own hands had already written. He decided to stop auditing the symptom and go look at the source, the one address on the road he had never driven to. I couldn't sit with it any longer, so one Saturday I drove out to the pin myself, in broad daylight, with the windows down like that would make it less frightening. It was the far edge of town, past where the streetlights give up. A rented storage unit and a shuttered lot behind a chain fence. Nothing. No reason on earth for my car to live a second life out there while I slept. I called Aaron, who I used to share a desk with before he left the firm. He's the only person outside the house I trust with something that makes me sound insane. I laid out the log, the seat, the mirrors, the smell. He didn't humor me. He said, "Stop guessing, Garrett. You reconcile accounts for a living, so go get the evidence. Put a camera in the car." So I did. I bought a small dash cam, the kind that hides up by the mirror, and I wired it in myself one afternoon with the garage door shut, hating my own hands the whole time. I felt like a man laying a trap in his own house. I set it the night before and lay there in the dark listening to every creak the old place made. In the morning, the seat was shoved back again. The mirrors were high. The memory card was already in my pocket, and my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't make myself look at it. The thread of comments had started saying out loud the thing he had been refusing to write in his own ledger. In the comments, someone wrote, "I work in fleet logistics, and connected car apps don't lie about odometer pulls. If the app said the engine ran, the engine ran." Someone was physically in that car. One commenter, Marrow and Static, said, "The seat being pushed all the way back every time means the driver was tall. Did you ever figure out how tall?" The reply to that was, "Trevor is 6'3". I'm 5'8". Every morning I'd climb in and have to drag the seat forward, and I kept telling myself I'd bump the lever getting out. I hadn't. The seat was set for him, and my sister knew I'd never put it together because I never once suspected her. He sat in the closed garage with the card and the player and his thumb hovering, already knowing that whatever played next could not be unseen. A few days later, he came back to the thread and posted the update none of us were ready for. I gave the police the dashcam card. I watched it that night in the dark with my headphones in, and I am still not the same man who pressed play. The footage starts with the dome light, and there she is in my driver's seat. Vanessa, my little sister, the one I fed and signed permission slips for, backing my car down our own driveway at 2 in the morning. Beside her, folded into my passenger seat with his knees up, was a man I had never seen in my life. She called him Trevor. He was tall enough that the seat made sense, the mirrors made sense. Every single morning suddenly made sense. Then the audio gutted me. They weren't whispering like thieves. They were comfortable, laughing a little. She told him my name was clean, that nobody in this town would ever pull over the quiet bookkeeper, that the storage unit was safe because it was paid under my account and my plates. Months of moving his cash out there, in my car, behind my name. Nobody made her. She picked me because I was the last person on earth anyone would check, and because she knew I'd never look at her twice. The danger never broke in. It grew up down the hall from me. I sat there until the card went cold in the player, and I knew I could not pretend I hadn't seen it. One commenter, Throwaway X, said, "The fact that nothing was ever stolen is the scariest part. Theft you can report. This was someone who wanted the car back before you woke up, which means they wanted you to keep trusting it." Dustin Kowalczyk commented, "Same pin every night plus rising cash flow you can't explain equals you were laundering somebody's money and didn't know it. As a bookkeeper, that has to be a special kind of sick feeling." A top comment reads, "That's the part that would ruin me. They didn't just take his car, they took his clean name. A bookkeeper's whole worth is being the guy nobody can pin anything on, and they spent that on purpose." He closed this the way he closed every set of books at year-end, line by line, until there was nothing left to carry forward. I drove the car to the police station the next morning. I didn't rage, I didn't cry in the lobby. I laid it on the counter the way I'd hand a client a finished return, flat and complete, every figure where it belonged. The footage held, the audio held. Vanessa and Trevor were both charged, and there was nothing on that card a lawyer could argue away, because I'd built it the way I build everything, clean enough to survive an audit. Then the cost came due. I couldn't stay in that house. Every hallway had her in it. Every photo on the wall was a girl I thought I'd saved. I sold the place we grew up in, the one I'd kept all those years for her sake, and I moved into a small rented unit across town where the driveway is empty and stays empty. My only sister won't take my calls. I don't know if she ever will. I half raised her, and she spent my name like loose change. People keep asking if I feel relief now that the numbers finally balance. They do balance. Every entry is accounted for, every mile explained, the whole thing reconciled down to zero. And I have never in my life felt poorer than I do staring at a ledger that adds up perfectly and leaves me with no one. A user named Pale Orchard wrote, "Whoever this was had a key, knew your sleep schedule, and knew exactly how long they had. That is not a stranger. That is someone in your life. In the comments, someone wrote, "You did the only right thing, and it still cost you everything. Closing those books was the bravest thing I've read on here. I'm sorry it had to be her." Pour yourself another cup and stay close, because we're rolling straight on to the next one.
The man in my dream started repeating things I'd only said out loud while awake, and tonight he told me where I really come from. Some people live so quietly that the only witness to their day is themselves. That was the whole problem. I'm 34, and I've spent the last few years living about as small as a life can get. I'm a paralegal, so my days are mostly other people's disasters. Stacks of filings, deadlines, evenings squinting at depositions until the words swim. Then I climb all those stairs to my rooftop flat, and it's just me, my dog, and my cat. No roommate, no partner. The animals are the only ones who hear me talk. For a long time, that suited me fine. The dream started maybe 4 months ago, and at first I barely noticed it. There's a man. He sits across a plain table from me, hands folded, saying nothing important. He never threatens me. He never reaches for me. He's just there, calm, a little tired around the eyes, like he's been waiting a while. I got so used to him that some nights I was almost glad to see him. Stress, I told myself, my brain decorating my exhaustion. This afternoon I was standing at my kitchen counter, alone, fighting with a drawer that always sticks, and I muttered half a sentence to myself. The kind of throwaway thing you say to no one. Nobody could have heard it. I live by myself. The windows were shut. She went to bed thinking nothing of it. The man was waiting. He leaned forward, opened his mouth, and gave her back her own private words, syllable for syllable. She woke certain and cold and very much alone. She spent the next morning building reasons. None of them held. I tried every explanation a sensible person reaches for. Sleep talking, an echo bouncing up the stairwell, some neighbor I'd never met pressing an ear to the wall. But I live alone. The drawer thing I'd muttered, I'd said it with my back to a locked door and the windows shut. So I started paying attention, which I now think was the mistake. The next night, he gave me back the grocery list I'd recited at the open fridge, in order, down to the brand of oat milk. The night after that, the exact curse I'd spat when the same drawer caught my thumb. Then, worst of all, the soft little name I use for my dog when it's just the two of us on the couch. A silly private name I've never said to another human being. He said it gently, almost like he understood why I'd chosen it. At work, I was useless. I read the same paragraph of a filing 4 times and signed nothing. Amber caught me staring and joked that I clearly needed a vacation and 12 hours of sleep, and I laughed and let her believe it. I started leaving every light on. I propped my phone up and recorded myself sleeping, and in the morning there was only my own breathing, no voice, nothing. I called my Aunt Laura twice that week and talked about nothing, the weather, her garden, never once admitting I was frightened of going to bed. And through all of it, he stayed calm, patient, a little sad even. That was the part that got under my skin. Not menace, just this quiet man who knew everything I said when I thought no one could hear and seemed sorry about it. So she made up her mind. Next time, she would stop waiting and ask him outright. That night, she stopped waiting. She set her hands flat on the dream table and asked him outright. I said it plainly, the way I'd rehearsed all day. Who are you, and how do you know what I say when I'm completely alone? He didn't flinch. He didn't give me a name. He just looked at me with those tired eyes and answered with a date and the name of a hospital, slow and certain, like he was reading it off something only he could see. I woke up before he finished the sentence, but I already had it. The date was my birthday. The hospital was the one I was born in, the one my mother always named when she told the story of the night I arrived. That was when it stopped feeling like something outside my window and started feeling like something inside my own history. I'm a paralegal. When something doesn't add up, I go to the records, so that's what I did. I pulled every old document I'd ever kept, my birth certificate, my mother's papers, and the timeline I'd been told my whole life didn't match the dates on the page. Hours that didn't line up, a transfer note that made no sense. I called my Aunt Laura
and the second I said the name of that hospital out loud, something in her voice closed like a door. She went quiet, then brisk, then told me to leave it alone, that some things from back then were better left buried. She'd never once told me to stop asking a question. That deflection scared me more than any answer could have. After I hung up, I sat on my floor and thought about the one thing of my mother's I'd never opened. A small, locked box in the back of my closet that she'd left me without a word about what was inside. She posted what she had so far, and the comments came fast. One commenter, Northbound Kira, said, "The part where he quoted your grocery list is what got me. That's not a dream remembering your day, that's something hearing you in real time." A user named Deadbolt Danny wrote, "Please tell me you kept that discharge form. A baby surrendered for shared sleep episodes is not a phrase any normal hospital writes." The reply to that was, "I have it in front of me right now." What I didn't put in the post is that my mother signed it, but the line for the father is blank, and there's a second signature I don't recognize. Initials L something. My Aunt Laura goes by Laura. I haven't been able to dial her number yet. One commenter, Salt and Cedar, said, "Whatever you do, do not go to that facility alone. If the staff knew to keep him isolated for this long, they know something you don't." A day went quiet on her page. Then the update landed, and the title alone told everyone what she'd done. I drove out to the facility and sat across from him. I'll get to the drive, but first I have to tell you what was in the box, because that's where everything broke open. I pried the little lock off with a screwdriver at my kitchen counter, the same counter where this all started. Inside there was a hospital bracelet. Not mine. Mine was already in there next to it, smaller, the ink faded. This second one had a different first name, and the same surname, and the same birth date as me. Under it was a discharge form for a baby boy, born 11 minutes before me. A twin. A brother I was never once told existed. The reason for surrender was typed in flat, clinical language. Persistent night terrors and shared sleep episodes, and he'd been signed away that same week. The man at the table was never a stranger, and never an intruder outside my window. He's my twin. He has a name. Logan. And the people who raised me, my Aunt Laura included, spent 34 years filing him under something we don't talk about. I called Laura and didn't let her change the subject this time, and she finally stopped pretending. She confirmed it in a small voice and asked me, please, to let him rest. But he wasn't resting. He'd been reaching me in the only room they couldn't lock. It took me one afternoon and a few phone calls to find him. A long-term care facility 2 hours north, still listed, still a current resident. I grabbed my keys, left extra food down for the dog and the cat, and got in the car. The thread went sideways. Strangers were grieving a man they'd never met. One commenter, Quiet Floor, said, 11 minutes apart and one of you just gets erased from the story? The cruelty of that is its own horror. Forget the dreams. One commenter, Miriam Out Loud, said, my grandmother always said my mom talked to her sleep brother. Family never explained it. Reading this with my stomach in knots. In the comments, someone wrote, it's wild how many families just quietly file a whole person under don't ask. Your grandmother handed you a confession and called it a quirk. One comment pointed out, the detail of him saying nothing important for months and then suddenly knowing your day, like he finally got close enough to hear through? 2 hours of road, and the table from the dream was waiting at the end of it. The facility was low and beige and smelled of floor cleaner and old radiators. A nurse walked me down a hall and into a plain visiting room, and there was a table, scuffed laminate, 2 chairs, and him already sitting on the far side. The exact table. The same tired eyes I've been meeting in my sleep for months. He was older in person, thinner, his hands folded just the way they always were. For a long moment, neither of us said anything, the way it always went. Then he looked up at me, really looked, like he'd finally gotten all the way through the wall they'd kept between us, and he said the half sentence I'd muttered at my counter that first afternoon, the one that started all of this, out loud, in his own voice. And then he smiled, just a little, like he'd been waiting 34 years to say it where I could see his mouth move. That night I slept without the table. No man, no quiet room, nothing. The dreams were simply gone. For the first time in my whole life, I felt complete, like a sentence that finally found its other half. And in the same breath, I felt robbed, because I'd been handed a brother and a goodbye in the same afternoon. Logan passed a few weeks later, in his sleep, the nurse said, peacefully. I still climb all those stairs to my flat, where it's just me and the dog and the cat. I'm not haunted anymore. I just carry the silence where his voice used to be, and I've learned that's a different kind of weight entirely. One commenter, H for Hollow, said, "He wasn't haunting you. He was the only one in your family actually trying to reach you. That's so much worse." On to the next one. My voice chat friend started doing my dad's voice perfectly. Then my sister's. He has never met either of them. Some stories don't announce themselves. They just slip in during the dull, harmless hours, and by the time you notice, you are already in them. I'm 34, an accountant, and I live alone in a quiet suburb where nothing ever really happens. After 10 or 11 hours of reconciling other people's numbers, my head feels like a wrung-out sponge, so a few months ago I started playing an online strategy game at night just to switch it off. That is where I met Caleb. We landed in the same voice channel one evening and just clicked. Easy laugh, good listener, the kind of guy who fills the silence in a too-quiet house without ever asking much of you. Over a few weeks, we got genuinely close. The thing is, I am not someone who talks about his personal life on a mic. I never once described my family to him. I never mentioned that my dad has lived in a care home called Lakeside since his stroke, or that I have a younger sister, Chloe, who does not game and who Caleb has never met or heard. They simply never came up. Then last Tuesday, mid-match, with no setup at all, Caleb stopped sounding like himself. His voice went slow and breathy, dragging the exact way my father's does now, right down to the small cough he tags on to the end of every sentence. And then, in that voice, he repeated, word for word, the private thing my dad only ever says to me when it is just the two of us in his room. Nobody else had ever heard those words. Nobody. So how could a stranger in a headset say them back to me? I did not move. The headset was still on my ears, the game still running without me, and somewhere far back in my mind I understood that I had stopped breathing. For 2 days I tried to file the whole thing under coincidence, the way I shelve a number that almost reconciles and promise myself I will hunt down the error later. I am an accountant, so my whole job is making impossible numbers make sense, and that is what I did with Caleb. I told myself I must have mumbled something about my dad on the mic once, half asleep, and that he was just a freakishly good mimic doing a bit. The next night, I tried to laugh it off and asked where the voice came from. He played it innocent, warm as ever, said I was imagining things, and joked until I was laughing too. But that was the night the questions started. Gentle ones, slipped between turns. How often did I get out to see my dad? Who handled his bills now that he could not? Was it stressful carrying all of it alone? And I answered. I live alone, so there was no one across the table to catch my face, no one to ask me later why I told a stranger so much. I told him I visited Lakeside most weekends, that I managed every account my father had, that some nights it was a lot. He just listened, and I felt better for saying it out loud. Then, near the end of the night, with nobody asking, his voice changed again. Lighter, quicker, with the little upward turn my sister Chloe puts on the end of everything. In her exact voice, he said, "You always overthink it, big brother." Chloe had never been in that channel. I had never once described how she sounded. It was the smallest, most ordinary sentence, the kind nobody would ever think to remember. That was exactly what turned my stomach to ice. An accountant learns to trust the one entry that does not belong, the figure that proves the rest is wrong. Every calm explanation I built that week quietly stopped adding up. After that, I stopped sleeping properly. I started recording our calls, telling myself it was so I could prove to myself in daylight that I had misheard. Instead, I sat at my desk between spreadsheets, headphones in, playing the same 10 seconds over and over. It was not an impression. Impressions are approximate. This was a reproduction. The wet catch in my dad's throat before a word. The exact place where Chloe's sentences go soft and trail off into nothing, like she has lost interest in her own thought. You cannot guess those things. You can only have heard them. One night, I stopped playing along and asked him straight out where he had heard my father. For the first time, the warmth just drained out of his voice. He went flat, cold, a stranger I had never spoken to, and he said quietly, "You should be more careful what you leave lying around." Then the channel went dead. He was gone, account and all, mid-sentence. I sat in the dark with my own breathing in the headset, and I knew, the way I know a column is wrong before I find the figure, that he had heard them somewhere real. I have no one here at home to say this to out loud, so I am writing it down for strangers, because I need someone to tell me I am not losing it. The thread filled overnight. Some readers were certain his house or his phone had been bugged. Others kept circling back to one cold, specific question. In the comments, someone wrote, "The fact that he started with your dad and not you is what gets me. He wanted you to recognize a voice you trusted before you ever clocked what he was doing." A user named nosleep wrote, "Whatever you do, get your dad's finances locked down and assume Caleb already knows the answers to every security question. People talk about everything at a bedside." One comment pointed out, "My grandmother is in assisted living, and last year a volunteer got let go after families complained he knew things. Nobody would tell us what that meant. Reading this, I feel sick." It took the better part of a week, but the OP came back, and this time the post had a new title at the top. "I finally know how he learned all of our voices." A few of you said the same thing, so I followed it. I pulled my own visit records and lined them up against the nights Caleb was loudest online, and the gaps fit together like two halves of the same ledger. The nights he went quiet were the nights someone was on shift at Lakeside. So I called the home and asked plain questions about their night staff, and the picture finally resolved. Caleb worked there. He was a night shift care worker on my father's floor and had been for more than a year. The home runs an in-room call and intercom system, the kind that is always half listening for a resident in distress, and he had access to all of it. Every soft thing I ever said to my dad after lights out. Every word my father coughed back at me. Chloe on speakerphone from the bedside on the weekends she could not drive in. He had been harvesting us in the dark the whole time, building a costume out of the most defenseless sounds a sick old man and his son ever made. And he did not pick me at random. I am the one who manages every cent of my father's money, and the friendly stranger who laughed at my jokes knew that before he ever said hello. I was never a friend. I was an account he was casing. The thread turned cold and sharp. The kind people sounded furious now, and the practical ones were already telling him exactly what to do next. Marrow and Salt commented, "A lot of care facilities record calls and intercom for quality and safety. If a worker had login access to that system, this is horrifyingly possible. Please tell me you reported him." Someone in the replies added, "You said you manage your dad's accounts. That is not a coincidence. That is a target. He didn't pick a random friend. He picked the family banker." One comment pointed out, "So he wiped the proof through official channels, and the institution helped him do it without even realizing. That's the scariest version of this." In the comments, someone wrote, "That's exactly it. He didn't need to hide. The system hid him. A man who can erase himself with a help desk ticket is not someone who got caught. He's someone who decided he was done." So I did everything the responsible part of me knew to do. I locked down every account my father had, changed each password and every security answer to things no bedside conversation could ever have given away, and I started asking Lakeside official questions in writing. That is where it all went quiet in a different way. The week I began pushing, the home told me it had restructured its night staff and that the intercom server had been wiped during a scheduled upgrade. Convenient timing, all of it. There was nothing left to pull, not a single recording. When I described Caleb, the name and the face, no one on any roster matched him. His game account was gone too, vanished overnight like it had never existed. I had secured the money, and I had absolutely nothing else. No proof, no name, nothing I could hand a police officer without sounding like the man who imagined a ghost in a headset. And here's the part I cannot put down. My dad is still cheerful when I visit. He told me last weekend about the nice young man who stops by his room after lights out, just to sit and chat with him. I checked, gently, twice. There is no one like that working there now. The thread did not offer him comfort. It offered the one small, awful observation he had been trying not to make himself. One commenter, Pale Radiator, said, "The cough detail." He didn't just learn the words, he learned a symptom. That means he sat there listening to your father breathe for a long time. Deadbolt Danny commented, "He imitated your sister too? Did Chloe ever actually call the home or visit? I'm trying to figure out where her voice even came from." On to the next one.
A coworker borrowed my keys for one morning. Now the county says he co-owns my house. She thought she was telling a story about a clerical mix-up. She wasn't. I'm 30, I'm a florist, and 2 years ago I bought the smallest house on my street, a little place with a crooked porch that I pay for entirely on my own. I live alone, and I like it that way. I work at a flower shop owned by a guy named Tyler, and for most of those 2 years, I was the one who opened up. First in, lights on, buckets filled, the smell of cut stems before anyone else arrived. That was my rhythm, and I loved it. One ordinary morning, my coworker Marcus offered to open for me so I could sleep in. He'd done little favors before, so I didn't think twice. I handed in the shop key ring. What I forgot, completely, was that my spare house key lived on that same ring. I'd clipped it there months ago and stopped seeing it. He had it for one morning. One. About a week later, an envelope landed in my mailbox that wasn't addressed quite right. A county tax statement for my exact address, my lot, my parcel. But the owner printed on the bill wasn't me. It was Marcus. His full name, where mine should have been. I told myself it was a glitch, and that night I pulled the county records online. There it was, a recorded, notarized deed handing him half of my home, signed by me, dated a day I was nowhere near a notary. The signature on the screen was hers, the handwriting was hers. She had simply never made it. And the worst part hadn't even surfaced yet. The first thing she tried to do was make it ordinary again. For a whole day I tried to talk myself down. A clerical error, a mixed-up parcel number, 2 addresses keyed in by a tired county worker who fat-fingered the wrong owner. People did that all the time, didn't they? So I went back to the deed and read it again, slower, and every line of it just shut another door in my face. My lot number, my legal description, all of it, down to the survey markers, my loan details. It was too exact to be a stranger's mistake. Somebody had my paperwork in front of them when they wrote it. The next morning, I went into the shop and tried to act normal around Marcus, and that was when the little things started lining up wrong. He knew my schedule better than I did. He knew which mornings I dragged. He was the one, I remembered, who suggested I sleep in. Not once, often. I'd always thought he was just being kind. Standing there filling buckets, I couldn't look at his hands. That evening, I called a locksmith and changed every lock on the house, hands shaking so badly I dropped the old keys twice on the porch. But while he worked, I noticed something in the back hall. A framed print I'd hung crooked 2 years ago was straight now, and the door back there, the one I'd always assumed was just papered over, an old, unused closet I never opened, the paint along its seam was cracked, like it had been opened and shut. New locks meant nothing. If his name was on the title before I ever turned a key, then legally, this was his house too. She had locked the doors. She had not asked who already lived behind one of them. So she stopped trying to explain it away and went looking for who built it. I took a morning off and drove to the county clerk's office, the deed printed out and folded in my bag. I expected someone to look at it for 10 seconds and call it fraud. Instead, a very patient woman behind the glass told me the record was valid. Recorded, notarized, stamped, and sworn. She kept using that word, valid, like it was supposed to comfort me. And every time she said it, the floor felt a little less solid. To the county, the lie was the truth,
and I was the one filing a complaint against it. So I started pulling the house's history myself, sitting at that counter request after request. And the more I pulled, the more the coincidences stopped feeling like luck. I only met Marcus after I moved in. The job at Tyler's shop had landed in my lap so easily I'd called it a blessing. Derek, the realtor who walked me through this exact house, who steered me off 2 others toward this one, kept surfacing in the margins of the paperwork in ways a stranger shouldn't. Every friendly accident in my last 2 years was starting to rhyme, and I didn't like the song. I filled out one more request before I left. The original notarized file, the physical one, not the scan online. The clerk said it would take a few days to retrieve from storage. I drove home, parked in front of my little crooked porch, and sat there with the engine off, bracing for whatever that folder was going to say. The comments under her post had stopped offering comfort. They had started offering warnings. In the comments, someone wrote, "A tax statement for your house in someone else's name is not a clerical error. That is the most deliberate thing I have read all week. Please tell me you stopped using that spare." One commenter, Derek showed up, said, "Wait, the realtor and the trustee both knew each other and neither mentioned it at closing? That is not a coincidence. That is a casting call." A user named Salt and Pine wrote, "Please do not confront him at the shop. Whatever this is, he has been building it longer than you have lived there." In the comments, someone wrote, "My guess is he refiled the deed after you moved in and backdated it to mess with your head. Backdating a notary stamp is easier than people think." The poster responded with, "No, I already pulled the original from the recorder's office in person, not the online copy. The stamp is real, and it is from 4 months before the listing ever existed. He did not add himself later. He was on my house before Derek ever handed me a key, and I am the only thing in this story that arrived recently." 3 days later, she came back with an update, and the title alone stopped the thread cold. I found the room they sealed off before I moved in. The folder came in from storage, and I read the original stamp at the counter. The notary date was 4 months before I ever saw the listing. 4 months before Derek showed me the porch I fell in love with. I keep rereading that because it breaks the whole story I'd been telling myself. Marcus did not sneak his name on after borrowing my key. He was already on the title the day I first walked through the front door, smiling, thinking how lucky I was. The previous owner wasn't a person. It was a trust. And Marcus was its trustee, the one who signed the property out. He chose to sell that exact house to me. Derek didn't just happen to show it to me. He steered me onto it, off the other 2. They knew each other the whole time. I didn't stumble into Marcus's life by taking a job at Tyler's shop. He built the shape of mine and waited at the end of it. I'm writing this sitting on my own kitchen floor because I can't make my legs work. The back hall door, the papered over one I never opened, the one whose seam I found cracked after the locksmith left. I've been pretending for 2 years it was just an old closet. It isn't a closet. The wall around it is thicker than the others. Tonight, I'm going to open it. I'm posting first, in case. One comment pointed out, "The fact that the deed predates your purchase is the part that made me put my phone down." He didn't react to you. He set the table and waited for you to sit. A user named Halflit Room wrote, "Why a trust though? People put property in a trust to keep a name off the public sale record. Whose name were they hiding?" A user named Halflit Room wrote, "The trust hiding a name is the thread I'd pull. Who lived there and died there before she moved in?" Someone else added, "Exactly this. A death recorded at that address would explain the trust, the patience, and why he picked a buyer who looks the way she described. He wasn't selling a house, he was filling a spot." She opened the door she had spent 2 years pretending was a wall. The wall around that door was thick, because it wasn't a closet, it was a room, and someone had sealed it shut before I ever signed a thing. I pried the painted seam, and the door gave with a soft tearing sound, and the smell that came out was old paper and dust. There were photographs, a whole wall of them, pinned in rows, of a woman in this house, in my kitchen, on my crooked porch, smiling at someone holding the camera. And her face was my face, not similar, mine. The same jaw, the same way of standing, the same part in the hair I've worn since I was a kid. I stood there and felt myself stop being a person and start being a slot somebody had been trying to fill. On a small table under the photos, there was a folder, and inside it, a half-finished marriage license application, his full name in his handwriting, and beside it, my name, in that same forged hand from the deed, waiting to be completed. That was when all of it turned over. I was never someone he wanted to rob. I was the replacement. The woman in the photographs lived here, and she died here. And the trust, the lucky job at Tyler's shop, Derek steering me onto this exact porch, the deed, the tax bill, the license. It was all one long machine built to quietly turn me into her. He didn't want my house. He wanted me to become the woman who was already gone. I called the police from the front yard. I am not going back inside. I left everything exactly where it was. The thread that had been telling her to be careful went very quiet, and then it spoke all at once. One commenter, Quiet Fern, said, "This was never a stalker collecting a key copy. This was identity replacement. He didn't want to watch you, he wanted to overwrite you." I have never been this scared reading a post. One comment pointed out, "Take the photographs and that marriage application straight to the police, not the county clerk. The county is where his paper trail is clean. The room is where it isn't. Document everything before you sleep anywhere near that place." Someone in the replies added, "I don't have words. Please be safe, and please let us know you made it out of this. Goodbye for now. Let's keep the lights on and move on to the next one."
The building app keeps logging my key fob coming home every Friday, and I'm never home on Fridays. I'm 30, I teach for a living, and I share an apartment with a couple of roommates, one of them a guy named Spencer. None of this is exciting, which is sort of the point. My Fridays are the least exciting part of all. The school I work at is clear across town, and Fridays are when I stay late and grind through a mountain of grading in an empty classroom, usually until well past 7. Nobody around, just me, a stack of papers, and the hum of the lights. Our building has one of those fob systems where every tenant can pull up their own entry history right inside an app. Every door, every tap, time-stamped to the minute. I'd honestly never opened it once. Spencer's the kind of person who pokes at every feature, though, and one night he's scrolling through his own log on the couch and he glances over and goes, "Why do you keep coming home Friday evenings? You're never here on Fridays." I laughed it off. I'm the most never home person on Fridays you'll ever meet. But he turned the screen around and there it was under my name. So I opened my own app and scrolled back. 3 months. And there was this clean little stripe of identical entries, one after another, neat as a ruler. My fob. The parking level side door. 14 minutes past 6 in the evening. Every single Friday, not one missed, while I was sitting alone in a classroom on the other side of town. Same fob, same door, same minute. And he was never there. I told myself it was a glitch. Some software hiccup, a duplicate record, a clock that didn't reset right. So I kept opening the app, night after night, scrolling that same stretch of history until my thumb ached. It never changed. Same parking level side door, same 14 minutes past 6, same weekday, week after week after week, lined up like someone had stamped them with a ruler. Glitches don't keep a schedule that clean. Glitches don't pick Friday and stick to it for months. And that was the part that started to crawl under my skin, because my Fridays are the easiest alibi I own. I'm across town in an empty classroom until well past 7 every single week, grading until my eyes blur. There is no version of me anywhere near that side door at 6:15, which meant someone else was. Someone walking into my building on my exact credentials while the app cheerfully wrote my name next to it. I brought it to Spencer. He went quiet, and that quiet scared me more than anything, because Spencer never goes quiet. He confirmed it without me asking.
He was home most of those Fridays, and he never once saw me walk through that door. We sat there throwing out theories like we could talk it into making sense. A cloned fob, some stranger who'd figured out the system, an ex-tenant whose access nobody ever bothered to kill. So I finally worked up the nerve to message Megan, the building manager. I laid it all out, calm as I could. She wrote back polite and breezy, like I'd asked about a parking spot. "The system can't be wrong," she said. "The log says it's your fob, so it's you." That was it. Door closed. She had the log, he had the truth. Only one of them was being believed.
I stopped waiting for the app to explain itself and decided to catch it in the act. The next Friday, I told Spencer to skip whatever he had going on and just sit tight near the parking level door from around 6, phone ready, while I cut out of school early for once and parked down the block where nobody would clock my car. The plan was simple. Whoever walked in on my name, one of us would finally see a face. A few minutes before the hour, Spencer texted that the corridor was dead quiet. Then, almost on cue, at 14 minutes past 6, he heard it. The side door's heavy click, the give of the hinge, footsteps moving down the hall with this awful, unhurried ease. Not someone sneaking, someone who belonged. By the time he leaned out, the corridor was empty, and a door somewhere had already shut. Whoever it was knew the building's rhythm better than we did. We had the sound, the timing, the certainty, and still not one clear look at who. That near miss didn't settle anything. It made the whole thing solid in a way I couldn't unsee. So I went back to Megan, harder this time, and asked her flat out to deactivate my fob and reissue a new one. She stalled, told me reissuing was a hassle, that I was reading too much into a log, that maybe I'd just forgotten coming home, like I'd misplaced an entire evening every week for months. I hung up, done being managed. Someone who walked the halls like he owned them. And the office kept telling him the halls were fine. A user named Lukewarm Coffee wrote, "A fob log that says you came home when you didn't is somehow worse than a broken lock. The system is lying with a straight face." Someone in the replies added, "Cloning those cheap fobs takes about 30 seconds with a $40 device. Anyone who's been near your keys could have done it." Spencer's plant commented, "Your roommate noticing before you did is the part that gets me. You walk past that log every day and your brain filters it as normal." A few days later, Throwaway Friday 6 p.m. came back with a new post, and the title alone said it all. I found out what authorized maintenance access actually means. So I finally wore Megan down. She agreed to kill my old fob and hand me a fresh one, and I walked out of that office sure I'd just ended the whole thing. New credentials, clean slate, no more phantom me strolling in on Fridays. I actually felt light for about a week. Then Friday came. 14 minutes past 6, the side door logged again. Except this time it wasn't my name on it. It read as an authorized maintenance fob. Same door, same minute, same unbroken stripe, just wearing a different label now. Deactivating mine changed nothing, because mine was never the one doing it. It clicked all at once, and I felt sick. It was never a stranger wearing my credentials. It was Ethan, down the hall. He doesn't just live on the floor, he does the building's repairs, and management handed him standing access to every unit up here long before I ever signed my lease. The entries I'd been so carefully screenshotting as proof of a break-in were, on paper, completely allowed. With one relabel, my evidence turned into a maintenance record, and I turned into the tenant who panicked over the handyman doing his rounds. One word, quietly typed into a field, and just like that, the intruder became a service. One comment pointed out, the fact that it's the same time every Friday means whoever it is has a schedule that lines up with yours being gone. They know when you teach late. One comment pointed out, pull your lease and look for who has declared right of entry. I have a bad feeling the answer is going to be staff anytime. In the comments, someone wrote, I'd bet money it's someone with management level access. A regular tenant can't make their entries get relabeled as authorized. Only the office can do that. And the original poster replied, you're right, and I found out exactly why. Ethan handles maintenance for the building,
So management never let him in. He already had a master key and standing access to my floor before I signed anything. That's the part that's wrecking me. There was never a lock to fix. I wish I could tell you I fought it and won. I didn't. I looked into breaking the lease, and there's no clause I can afford on a teacher's paycheck. Not with what they'd charge me to walk away. Management treats the whole thing as settled because the access is officially authorized now, stamped and labeled and clean. Ethan still does the building's repairs, which means Ethan still holds a master key to my actual door, and there is nothing on paper that says he can't use it. The system didn't just fail me. It got quietly rewritten until I was the unreasonable one, the tenant who made a fuss over a man doing his job. So Spencer and I did the only thing left that's actually ours. We put in a deadbolt the company can't override, the kind they don't hold a copy to. It helps, a little. But a second lock only matters when someone's home to throw it, and the whole point was that he came on Fridays because nobody ever is. So now we make sure somebody is. Every Friday, a little before 6, the two of us just sit in the living room with every light on, the television low, and we wait. Sometimes the hallway creaks right around that time, and we both go still and say nothing. I don't know if it's him. I just know the log will say it was allowed. Nothing illegal ever happened. That is the part that doesn't let go. One comment pointed out, "Please tell me you checked the inside of your apartment for things moved, not just the building door." The door is how they get in, not why. One commenter, Not Again Friday, said, "The moment management can reissue your fob and the entries keep coming, it's stopped being an outside stalker. That's an inside job, and you live with it." Thanks for staying with me through these. If the dread is your thing, hit subscribe and I'll keep them coming.